Now, it has been 3.5 months since the BBI report was launched last November. And since then, a series of popularization rallies have followed. Well, this weekend is an exception because of the coronavirus threat. But beyond the push for new posts and the heavy politicization of the process, the report titled Building Bridges to a United Kenya from a Nation of Blood Ties to a Nation of Ideals. It also interrogates the state of Kenya's value systems. Well, Chapter 2 of the report touches on the lack of a national ethos. But is Kenya really suffering from a values crisis? Do we need an overhaul of the existing value systems? Well, my discussion on the state of our value systems starts right now. Say has worked for 23 years in East, West and Southern Africa with a focus on humanitarian response and development programming. She's also on the social and political front when it comes to consumer justice, leading the #SwitchOffKPLC campaign in Kenya. Reuben Kigame is a respected musician as well as a teacher at the Africa International University, a media consultant, author and social critic. Thank you so much to the both of you for coming on and sharing your insights and getting to a discussion that I feel has been on the interwebs for quite some time. Many concerned about the state of our value system. Do we even have one? I'll begin with you, Reuben. Just in terms of looking back, the days of old, you know, we always kind of compare to generations ago when things were a certain way. Yeah. How would you describe our value system at that time?
Looking back.
Looking back.
Yeah, that's where we go wrong because the way I see it, there is no back and forth. Value systems are the foundation of any society. So the same things that made societies succeed, whether you're looking at Greece or Rome or the Mwene Motapa kingdom in Zimbabwe, it's the same thing, just a very, very great sense of morality or ethics, that there is right and wrong written in the heart of man. And Victoria, it is regardless of who you are, where you're born, how old you are, what faith you hold on to or don't hold to. Right and wrong is, as C.S. Lewis put it, the key to meaning in the society. If you don't have any sense of right and wrong, you really cannot have a society.
Jerotich, what's your take on?
I was reflecting on this issue of values, and I think back to the recently released BBI report that I do not, I've read thoroughly, but I do not support or agree with the process at all. And one of the things that struck me is the weaponization of values to attack Kenyans. When you read the report, it talks about how Kenyans have lost their values, how parents have lost control over their children, how we are not honest, we are not good, we are this, we are that. And it struck me quite a lot that there has been almost a gaslighting of Kenyans into believing that the reason why we are where we are today as Kenya is because I personally, Cherotich, have failed to do X, Y, or Z, or I have failed to raise my children in a particular way. I think the story is slightly different. I do believe that, yes, indeed, values are instilled at home. It's from the intimate to the global. It always starts in the house. It's how I've raised my children, how I've taught them to behave, whether they put their hand on their forearm when they're shaking hands with elders and so on. So there are all of those things. But I think what is, for me, more important to recognize is the macro value system in this country that speaks to, for example, the political culture. And if you talk about the political culture, Narok, where Babu Owino was allowed to address the crowd, somebody who we saw on CCTV shooting a DJ in the neck, who is still fighting for his life in hospital as we speak.
It's terrible.
But the Building Bridges initiative, which is about peace, which is about cohesion, which is about all of these things, actually invited him to the podium, and he went ahead to say that they were crying out for him. And so it makes me say, well, if the macro political culture, that space with its value system, tells us that it's okay to glorify and put in a position of almost worship somebody who has clearly violated values, no matter which way you look at it, to pull out a gun and shoot someone in the neck when it was not for self-defense. Even self-defense would have to be prosecuted appropriately so that the person is acquitted and told that this was a case of self-defense. So I look at it and I say, don't start with the households. Kenyans are working hard to do their bit at home, to raise their children the right way against the backdrop of a completely eroded society.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
It is actually maybe even a little tolerable up to that point until the case is handed to, you know, a judge, the keeper of the law, and he, you know, sends this guy out on bail.
Yes.
And I'm asking the question.
In installments that he can pay.
He can pay over time.
What is that?
Yes.
What is that? Because that wouldn't be done for an ordinary Kenyan.
And let me ask this, because then are we saying that the political class are setting the moral tone for the country, if at all? Because if you're talking about them almost absolving him by putting him on that stage at the Narok BBI rally, he is okay.
Yes, they're setting the tone. And Babu, loose from Babu. Babu is one of the many cogs in the wheel of a failing system.
Exactly.
Look at the issue of the war on corruption. Look at what happens when people who are caught stealing at the political class level. Look at what happens to them. Nothing. Unless it is part of the weaponization of the war on corruption. So I think that it is a national value space that is imposed on Kenyans, which is absolutely wrong. We know the difference, as Ruben said, between right and wrong. Wrong will always be wrong, right will always be right. And we're forced to live under this. And when push comes to shove, they turn around and say, actually, no, it's you, mothers and fathers and daughters and sons and aunties and grandparents who are failing. And the political class has failed to look at itself, to set the tone for what should be done in Kenya.
Yes, and I have a slightly escalated version of that. Article 10 of our constitution sets out that anyone in office or whatever would have to be led by a certain set of values. We all know them. Then chapter 6 of the constitution is really on ethics, on how you live, how you lead, and what principles will guide you. We've thrown all of those out of the window, and we're imagining we can now start putting up another document, make a review. We haven't even implemented what we already have.
I think that has been the conundrum here in Kenya. We have great laws, stellar laws, but we cannot seem to put them into place or implement them. I want to go back to something that you mentioned, Jerotich, in terms of how we're structured. So we have the intimate space of family, and then we go to the macro level of government, or if it's religious institutions. And I wonder, what does it say? If we say that, yes, the political class, political system is broken, what does it say about the family institution and religious institutions, and maybe the impact and influence they have on a space like the political class?
Well, I don't know that there is an impact from the intimate, from those spaces on the political class per se, but I would say that what the intimate spaces observe is how it's a case of monkey see, monkey do. So we have spent our time raising our kids to the best of our ability in a good way, in a manner that is value-based. Regardless of your faith, regardless of other things, you have a value system that you've passed on to your children. And then, for example, if you're a Christian, you go to church and you see your pastor receiving millions of shillings in donations from a rogue politician. Alleged. You have to always put alleged so that you're not accused.
To be politically correct.
So that you're not accused of defamation.
Because we still
like
say
that.
Alleged even when we know the facts.
We know. So if I have spent all this time telling my son or my daughter that stealing is wrong, or I have been told by my parents when I was growing up stealing is wrong, and you see somebody handing over, obviously, proceeds of some criminal enterprise, and the pastor is so pleased to receive these donations and praises the person, thanks the person, you look and you say, wait a minute, so maybe it's not bad to steal a little bit. And actually, the best way to steal and get away with it is to make sure you're part of the political class, because that is where impunity reigns supreme.
No, and just getting back to what Jeritage was talking about, just the whole degradation of our value system is why you've proposed something very interesting, Ruben, VBI, Values Building Initiative, as opposed to BBI, because you've said there's no need to build bridges. We haven't burnt bridges per se between each other communities. We need to build our values.
We you know, our children grow up in the estates not knowing whether you are a Luo or a Mijikenda or Kalenjin or Kikuyu.
Yeah.
But the politicians come around and tell them, do you know who you really are? So they ruin their identity, the patriotic identity they have. And so you look at all the good things that we stand for, we aspire for, they're thrown out of the window and replaced by artificial, useless rhetoric and documents like the BBI. You know, we just came out of an election and we are going to be busy talking politics another 4 years. And so my question is, why not just stop and go right back to the foundations and salvage the few things that are still left and agree that as Kenyans, we are going to insist on some minimums, at least character, accountability, you know, justice for all, equality for all. You know, let's protect our country before it's destroyed. Let's stop the runaway situation.
I have to ask you this, Jeritage. Now, looking at solutions, how do we start creating a critical mass of people who are going to say enough is enough? And let's salvage the very little that we have in terms of a value system as we move the country forward. How do we get these people to rise up and demand for a better Kenya? How does that happen?
You know, this is such an important question, because I, for one, am convinced, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that there are more good people in Kenya than bad.
You're right.
There are so many good Kenyan men, women, children. Really. The reason why it is difficult to build this critical mass, there is fear. There's also a level of aloofness where, for example, the middle class says, yeah, we're affected, but not so bad. If I have to tighten my belt and we eat meat 4 times a week instead of 7 times a week, that's fine. I think we haven't been squeezed to the point that there's not a drop of water anywhere in Nairobi. We're not just talking about the underserved sections of the city, but the entire city, until everybody has bought their last bottle of water off the shelves, until we realize there's an utter crisis, and we are not yet up against the wall like that. But the good people are there. The good people are there. They're driven by fear. Fear also of reprisal, of retribution. How many people have lost their jobs? How many people have been scandalized, blackmailed, harassed out of spaces that they're familiar with? People are scared away from speaking up against what is wrong. So this critical mass that is elusive will continue to be elusive.
When King Kaka came out with his song,
Wajinga
it
Nyinyi,
was, the Wajinga Nyinyi, it was like bottled in anger. And so it's happening, and he's not the only one. He's not the only one. I have a couple songs that are never played, so we'll not even go there now. So what's going to happen? Because it can't go on like this forever.
Right.
One is, if we ignore the essentials, they will ignore us. We are demanding a turnaround back to values. We are demanding that those that have been named in corruption scandals be jailed and removed from office instead of being transferred to other sectors of government. We are demanding that we be represented, and the politicians are not representing us. We are demanding for taxation that can be justified.
We know what's wrong with the system. We know the areas that are ailing. But what does success look like? What do we really want to see in this country? And I think also, as much as you said, Ruben, Kenyans are angry, and yes, we reach points, but we're not persistent. You know, the song of King Kaka came out, and what happened after that? You know, we'll talk and we'll make noise, but we won't be persistent in pushing something until something is done. So how do we get to a point where we actually see action on the ground a lot of the things that we are complaining about?
That's a really good question, and it takes me to Malaysia and the fact that Malaysia was able to reboot. They took the courage and brought back their president and said, we want to clean up this system, we want to reboot, we want to find ourselves in a place where we are not sinking in endless debt, for example, to the Chinese and so on and so forth. Kenya must be willing. Success for me is Kenya that not only imagines a reboot, but executes a reboot.
Yes.
And the execution of that reboot will happen when we are disciplined and focused. You know, we suffer from whiplash as Kenyans. Every single day there's a brand new scandal. While we're busy laughing at Ngirita, Nairobi is being signed over. And while Nairobi is being signed over, Talo is leaving and the Chinese are moving in to bid for oil in Turkana. There's a non-stop, the locusts are all over the place. The nymphs are now, we're suffering constantly. And I think it is deliberate. It is to keep us unfocused and undisciplined. And if we are not disciplined and focused, we will never get to the point where we can achieve success in the form of a reboot. So that focus, that discipline, if you have an issue, stay on it, don't leave.
All right, thank you so much, Jeritage and Ruben. We can be here all afternoon talking about this particular issue, but I feel if we are proactive as a people and persistent until we see something shift, until that dial even moves just a bit, we have done something not just for this generation, but for the ones to come. Thank you so much. Keep the conversation going on social media. Hashtag Citizen Weekend. We want to hear from you. Maybe some solutions you've been sitting on and haven't brought out to the public. We need your voice and your minds as well to turn this Kenya into the one we want to see. Thanks for watching.